At this time, if everybody would stand, we'll do the invocation, Mr. Garber, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas Pledge.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's pray. Father, I just want to thank you for this new year, and I want to ask that you help us to live aware. Help us to redeem any opportunities in our community that we lost in the previous season. And Lord, we pray that you would allow us the grace to listen to your words and to step out in faith and conviction to make a difference in this great city. In Jesus' name, amen.
Raise the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Right now, we have some presentations to make tonight, and this is always a time where we get to really thank our citizens. And I'll let Chief Thiessen make the presentations, but these gentlemen that are here tonight to get recognized are someone that went above and beyond the call of duty in terms of saving people's lives and helping the fellow citizens. And I'll let Mr. Thiessen make the presentations.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to be able to come up and give this award of exemplary action to three of our citizens. And if they would come up here next to me, Rick Turner, Trey Turner, and Aaron Fireball. And I hope I pronounced Fireball correctly. Okay. Looks like just two out of the three. Okay. Trey is not here. Okay. So a little background on the call. On October 17th, we had a fire on Silver Meadow. I believe one of y'all texted a glowing picture to the city manager because he texted me immediately while I was commanding that fire. And so I said, yes, you're correct that we have a pretty big fire. In fact, it was a 2-alarm fire. The fire started in a garage or apartment over a garage. The issue is that the main home on that property was also on fire, and then the next door neighbor's house was starting to catch on fire when I got on scene. Our priority obviously is life safety, and then our safety, and then property conservation. But what was really fantastic about this was that these guys here took care of the first priority for us. They went and to the main home. They were, if you can imagine being in your home and somebody banging on your door and screaming at you, you probably wouldn't answer the door. And that's exactly what happened. So they went to a window and broke the window out and were able to get these three people out and really save their life because their house was on fire in the attic and they had no idea. And so when we got there, that life safety protocol was already taken care of. And so what we were able to do was start right off into the property conservation, which saved us a lot of time. It still was a devastating fire. The neighbor home did catch a little bit, but we were able to stop that. But it was a total loss on the main structure. But without these gentlemen, we would have been possibly going after three of those victims. So great job. I don't know if we want to do pictures or anything like that.
The whole council come down and we'll take a picture with them to recognize them.
Wore my balloon dress. We can line it up that way. Kind of center that. All right, folks. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Give me one more. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thanks, y'all.
I don't don't really want to say anything in particular. I mean, we happened to be in the right place at the right time, so there it was. Any of y'all would have done the same exact thing. So we appreciate you guys. Yeah.
We also have a proclamation tonight for Denton County Commissioner Ron Marchand, but I don't see him here right now. Hopefully, when he does arrive, we'll break in the action and recognize him. But he has just retired as. I think I see him coming in.
There he is.
Yep. So, what great timing, huh?
He's making a grand entrance.
That's right.
Start the music. You get a front row seat, Ron. Okay. Celebrating County Commissioner Ron Marchand. This is his proclamation from the city of Corinth. Whereas Ron Marchand began his 34-year career in public service as a council member for the city of Carrollton, Texas, and whereas Mr. Marchand continued his pursuit of public service and was elected Justice of the Peace for Precinct 6, where he learned the issues facing Denton County residents and set the foundation for his future endeavors. And whereas in 2007, Ron was elected as County Commissioner for Precinct 2, serving the residents of Denton County for 16 years during major growth, COVID-19, and more. And whereas Commissioner Marchand aided in keeping taxes low for property owners, supported mental health services for these in need, assisted with mega vaccination clinics at the Texas Motor Speedway, and spearheaded the Employee Health Clinic for employees and retirees of Denton County. And whereas Commissioner Marchand has served on numerous boards and committees ranging from the North Texas Clean Air Steering Committee to the MetroCrest Hospital Authority, and served as a Carrollton Christian Academy mock trial coach, teaching an upcoming generation about trial procedures. And whereas Ron is calling it a career as of December 31st, 2022, and retirement has never looked so good, spending time with his children and grandchildren while continuing to work on public issues in the region throughout advocacy and outreach. Now, therefore, I, Bill Heidemann, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of Corinth, Texas, do hereby honor Commissioner Ron Marchand for his leadership and service to his community in Denton County, Texas, signed this 19th day of January 2023. So, we also, I had told him when at his retirement recognition up at the county courthouse, I said, I'm going to give him a key to the city for all the things that he did. And I don't think people realize it. Ron wasn't our representative but for about a year. But in that 1 year, he really helped and assisted us as a city when we were working through the broadband. And he's been a big advocate of helping us as a city in terms of road funding and other projects that are on the books right now to be done. So we really appreciate all your efforts in serving us, the city of Corinth, and we want to give you this key and present it to Commissioner Ron Marchand in appreciation of your commitment to public service as Denton County Commissioner. Congratulations on your retirement, Corinth City Council, and the city of Corinth. So, if everybody would come down, we'll take a picture.
Trying to get here.
It's all kind of center under the seal.
Is this also a get out of jail?
All right, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Very nice. Thank you all. Yes, sir.
Well, I thought my replacement was going to be here, but that's okay. He tags along behind me. Pretty soon he won't be doing that. But as the mayor said, I've had the pleasure of representing you guys for 1 year. But in that 1 year's time, have grown to love the city of Corinth. I've been around since 1963 in Carrollton. Moved out of Love Field, where my dad was a barber at Marsh Lane Barbershop, Walnut Hill and Marsh Lane for years and years and years. And then the whole Marchant clan moved out north. So I've seen growth that's been unbelievable. But growth is unbelievable only when it's controlled. And I've seen the city of Corinth control that growth. I've seen other cities and municipalities who didn't know how to control the growth. But I will tell you that I always had faith, even though I didn't represent you in voting for any kind of project, TERS, road projects, anything that would come across this council's desk and come across our dais to support you, because I truly believe that you were responsible for the future of Corinth in a very, very responsible way. And I ask for you to pray over me and my family, because I'm going to drive my kids crazy. I was sick the first 2 weeks of retirement, and now I'm not. I have done so many projects at the house that I don't know what I'm going to do. But anyway, I've been working since I was 11 years old. And when my daddy told me when I wanted a pogo stick, he said, I can't afford a pogo stick, but I can afford a roof over your head, food on the table, and clothes on your back. Anything above that or beyond that, you're going to have to go out and make it yourself. So I signed up I took Boys Life because I was in Cub Scouts, and I bought a bunch of flower seeds. Went door to door selling flower seeds. Now, I'd like to tell you that turned into an empire, but it didn't. But I did get my pogo stick. So I came from great roots. And great roots will continue to be the foundation of the faith that I have in my Lord Jesus Christ, faith I have in my family, and I have faith that I have in government servants as yourself. And I thank you so much for this proclamation. And if you need anything else, give me a call.
You have the key to our city, so.
Yeah, you got it. Okay.
I also would like to recognize Kevin Faulkner. He just walked in. He is our new county commissioner, and we hope that he'll listen to us too.
You guys are in good hands.
I'll just say thank you so much. You know, he's got some big shoes that I have to fill, but I really am so proud of Corinth and what you all are doing and have done. It's so exciting to see what's happening up here, and I'm really excited to be a little piece of that. So I look forward to helping out wherever I can. So thank you so much for what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
He's my Facebook rep. Social media rep, I should say. Oh, my, yeah.
Very good.
All right, great. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, citizens' comments. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Comments about any of the council agenda items are appreciated by the council and may be taken into consideration at this time or during that agenda item. Council is prohibited from acting on or discussing items brought before them at this time. We have some people here that have turned in a request to speak, but I believe they want to speak when we talked in the public hearing. Is that correct? Or you can talk now.
There may be one that's the very top one, I think, is related to something else.
Is that Alicia Fick? Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you. It's is it Alana Fickles? Please state your name and your address for the records, please. And you have 3 minutes.
Alana Fickus, 2712 Cherokee Trail, Corinth, Texas. I first want to thank you all for your service to the community and its residents. I understand making decisions for the community as a whole and balancing the city budget while keeping its citizens happy can be challenging. Plus, I'm sure it's tough to decline or accept money the city might, can, or will make at the expense of its citizens. I implore you to please make decisions based on what's best for the community as a whole, not the potential money it might bring for the city or possibly you personally. Please keep commercial and multi-family zones away from single-family zones. Apartments or stores should not be placed near or around a family neighborhood. I'm here today and will continue to attend these meetings as a reminder that what you decide matters. Please make decisions like they'll affect you personally, because the truth is it's affecting someone either positively or negatively. It might not be in your backyard, but it's in someone's. Please keep multifamily and commercial properties by the highway or along major roads, not in existing housing developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and these other ones do not want to speak, but they want to be recorded as far as the public hearing. So we'll do that at that time. At this time, have the consent agenda, and I entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? If not, cast your vote. It's unanimous. Item number, public hearing. Conduct a public hearing to consider testimony and act on a rezoning request by the applicant, Greystar Development Central, LLC, to amend the zoning ordinance and zoning map of the City of Corinth, each being a part of the Unified Development Code of the city from MXC to M Mixed Use Commercial to a planned development comprised of 2 base zoning districts consisting of MF3 multifamily residential tract 1 and on approximately 25.12 acres and MXC mixed use commercial tract 2 on approximately 7.56 acres with the collective site acreage totaling approximately 32.68 acres located on the north side of the Lake Sharon Drive between I-35E and Corinth Parkway. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is the required public hearing for the rezoning request for the Corinth Groves project, the north side of Lake Sharon Drive. I believe this item was tabled at the developer's request at your last meeting, and Michelle Meixel is going to give you the staff report this evening.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. As a reminder, this is Corinth Groves mixed-use multifamily commercial plan development. The location for this project site is just west of I-35 on the north side of Lake Sharon and bounded by Corinth Parkway to the west. You'll see that generally this is the perimeter of Lynchburg Creek And just north of that is a fairly recently approved Parkway District PD. The project site is 32 acres, a little over 32 acres in total. It's a heavily treed site. And as mentioned, the Lynchburg Creek is defining the northern boundary, and over 50% of the acreage is within the 100-year floodplain of the Lynchburg Creek. Oh, excuse me. The site is interestingly divided by 2 drainage ways through the site from the Lynchburg Creek that creates 3 developable pockets. It's being proposed for development in 2 phases. On the east side would be the phase 2 mixed retail commercial, and on the west side would be the multifamily that's being proposed under MF3. The MF3 takes up about 2/3 of the site, and it's about 25 acres, and they're proposing 464 total units. There'll be a mix of 2-story townhouse-style buildings and 4-story urban residential. One unique factor of this development, there are numerous trails, tree preservation, and open space pockets, a promenade that you'll see, and 2 tandem urban greens, as well as a pocket private park. The phase 2 is a mixed-use commercial. That consists of 7.5 acres, and they're proposing just under 40,000 square feet of commercial retail at the corner. In terms of existing zoning, the site is actually zoned in its entirety MXC, which is mixed commercial. And you'll see here that mixed commercial permits retail, restaurants, office, and does currently permit multifamily. One of the things the applicant did at Steph's request was to identify specifically the western half of the western 2/3 specifically as multifamily, just to allow for ease of administration. In terms of future land use, this area is a part of the TOD, Corinth Parkway, where City Hall, the trail, and then here's I-35. This whole area is envisioned for a connection to provide support to our new city center and the transit stop and so forth. You might recall from other projects under the TOD, there's no maximum density. It would be market driven. There's a wide range of urban and non-residential concepts that are proposed in the TOD. It also talks about connections to trail networks, adjoining uses, and this site in particular was identified in a section of the comprehensive plan as a strategic focus area that identified, just for reference, this is I-35, this is Lake Sharon, and this is Corinth Parkway, identified this area as urban residential with a non-residential component off to the east at the hard corner. It also discussed incorporating the natural features on the site. In terms of trails, active transportation, the comprehensive plan also identified side path trail along Lake Sharon, which the applicant is proposing to widen, you'll see, to 10 feet. As well as provide a 6-foot trail going north along Corinth Parkway. The active transportation plan identified a trail generally along Lynchburg Creek, and you'll see that the applicant is also proposing a trail. In terms of the specifics of the multifamily, and I know that the applicant's representative, Nikki Moore, has a much more in-depth presentation that she'll be covering. But in general, they're proposing 6 2-story townhouse-style multifamily units or buildings, framing primarily Corinth Parkway and Lake Sharon. The first floor would be private with a little private yard. They have 2-car garages, and there are 2 bedrooms. And they're also proposing 6 4-story multi-buildings, generally located interior to the site, with the exception of building 1, which is exterior, but this side is fronting onto Lake Sharon, which would also be 4 stories. Also includes private yards, tuck-under garages, and carports. You'll notice that the applicant is proposing a grid pattern of streets. While these are private drives, they are providing more of a grid to be in keeping with the TOD concepts. as well as providing on-street parking with internal to their site. In terms of transportation, they're proposing deceleration lanes along I-35 at key access points, as well as along Lake Sharon. They're proposing a secondary fire lane that I know the applicant will describe, accessing the site here off of Lake Sharon. It'll have a locked gate, as well as providing an fire access to the north. There are numerous park areas. This area identified in green would be a tree preserve. They're proposing 35% of the healthy protected trees on site in terms of caliper inches to be preserved. They're also preserving two large, one is a over 40 caliper inch heritage tree at the corner and another 38 caliper inch tree in the pocket park. Numerous trails. One other key factor we'll see a little bit later on is a promenade along a drainage divide that will be planted with trees and create a pedestrian loop around, connecting both the commercial and the residential. As part of Phase 1, even within Track 2 that is proposed for a commercial, and they're providing pedestrian access, a pedestrian easement for the public to utilize those trail loops. So this is a view looking at the landscaping and how that drainage channel might relate between the commercial piece to the east and the multifamily to the west. That view is looking from Lake Sharon into the site. In terms of the commercial, they're proposing, as I mentioned, 40,000 square feet of retail restaurant and outdoor seating that would be viewing over the heavily planted pedestrian promenade. And again, here's another view looking into the site from Lake Sharon. This is a landscape plan. I'll just stop here briefly. They are heavily planted with shade trees within a landscape edge buffer along the perimeter of the site, as well as through the promenade. These are some images of the representative elevations. This would be the pocket park at the northeast corner of Lake Sharon and Corinth Parkway. This is looking internal to their main access, and this is some representation of the commercial. I'll go over this very quickly as a reminder. Our current MF3 zoning district is more suburban in nature, and in order to encourage or permit innovative land use concepts, we have the PD option for applicants to propose alternative standards. These are some of the alternative standards. I know they were detailed in your packet. They are proposing a 1.6 spaces per dwelling unit within the multifamily, within the townhome style, 2.7. They're going 4 stories, 18.5 dwelling units per acre. In terms of building facades, you know that our current ordinance has very general language. The applicant has agreed and offered to provide 100% brick or stone masonry materials for buildings that are visible from the public street, except for certain aspects such as windows, doors, balconies, patios, and so forth. They're proposing private urban yards. I mentioned earlier that they're proposing 35 to protect the trees, and also the minimum requirement for park and recreation open space and trail dedication would be, I think, 9.2 acres in total, and they're proposing 10.8 acres to be counted toward, as well as providing the additional trails, or including the additional trails. In terms of Track 2, from the commercial standpoint, they're proposing to prohibit certain uses that may not be compatible with their neighborhood, and in particular, they're also offering up additional building materials for their commercial, such as 75% of the total exterior walls would be differentiated by texture, material, and stucco, and so forth. In terms of the comprehensive plan, it's designated, as mentioned, the mixed-use TOD. The land use strategy talks about this overall density max, but rather being market-driven. And again, the area was identified as a strategic focus area. The applicant did hold a neighborhood meeting back in March of 2022. Notifications were sent out. No neighbors attended. In terms of letters of support, we have not received any letters of support to date, though we have received 2 letters of opposition from property owners within 200 feet, and 1 letter of opposition from a resident beyond the 200-foot buffer. The Planning Commission at their November 28th meeting passed a motion 3-2 recommending approval of the Corinth Groves PD application with 3 particular stipulations, and I'll go into those. Though I do want to point out that while there were 2 dissenting votes from the Planning and Zoning Commission, those dissents were related to the stipulations, not wanting to add those stipulations to the project. The members were in favor of the project as presented, just to clarify. Now, if you beg my pardon, this is the proposal that the stipulations that the P&Z members proposed, and I'd like to go to the next slide, which can show you what staff had recommended and what the applicant recommends, and then you can see a highlight and strike through. So I think it makes it more clear. Wanting to point out as well, the applicant did consider the stipulations that the Planning and Zoning Commission offered, but respectfully declined. So this slide. Let me go back for a moment. One of the stipulations, item number 1, this was straight out. They are asking that building 1 be reduced in height to be no more than 3 stories. Let me show you that first. So along Lake Sharon, building 1 is here. So you can see the predominance of the building is parallel and blocking the view from I-30 or 35. There would be this portion, the southern portion, the side of the building that would be 4 stories versus the 2-story buildings that are proposed along the perimeter. So P&Z had asked that that building be reduced to no more than 3 stories. So the second item, and you can see the underline would be the items P&Z added, and the items that were with the strike through. So all building facades. Would you like me to read it? Would that be the easiest? Okay, I'm just going to read, so I think it'll be easier. Okay, all building facades of buildings 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, and 11 that face Lake Sharon Drive and Corinth Parkway, except for windows, doors, garages, balconies, patios, corridors, stairways, shall be composed of 100% brick, stone, or masonry materials. So what was taken out was the general language that said primarily visible from and located on. Then in terms of the remaining facade elements, which are listed there, P&Z recommended deleting any accent details above the top plate and then kept the remaining language. So it would read, the remaining facade elements may be cementitious material that are painted, stained, or factory applied finishes that make them look like wood. And then they were proposing that any facades of buildings interior to the site, not specifically noted above, generally comply with the facade and material representations depicted in their elevations. And staff is recommending approval as presented. The applicant is here this evening and has a presentation. So let me step back that what's not listed here, but it is noted in your staff report that it would be to your discretion whether or not to accept the Planning and Zoning Commission stipulations. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
May I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
In layman's terms, can you describe the difference between the way the language was written versus what we can expect to see with the new language with the facade?
Would it be acceptable if I deferred that to the applicant in terms of the architectural
Of course.
piece? I know that they were very concerned on how that might be limiting them.
I'll ask him when they come up.
That's time. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
Actually, I do have one quick question, Michelle. What is, as it's currently zoned MXC, what is the maximum multifamily that would be allowed under that zoning classification?
That's a very good question. So in the MXC district, in terms of density, it permits a maximum of 16 dwelling units per acre, and they're proposing 18.5. Now, there is some language in that district that has a caveat that 10% of mixed-use commercial district, could be multifamily. Now, I can say in the past with our prior director, her interpretation was that meant if you include all of the MXC districts, that only 10% of those districts could be multifamily.
The city as a whole, every single MXC district added all together, 10% could be multifamily. It's not a standalone for each parcel?
That's why I said that's a good question. I may have to reach out to John Webb. So that was the interpretation at the time, and also the interpretation when this applicant originally came forward talking with staff.
Because my interpretation of it
is a single site.
Is that single site 10% could be multifamily, right? And then the rest of it would be other uses, commercial, retail.
Correct.
So this essentially flips that. This plan flips that. It's about 90% multifamily and 10% retail.
Correct. So why I wanted to step back and explain under prior interpretation of staff, when the applicant first sat down in pre-application, that was the interpretation. Now, I can say that the language it's a challenge. The language of the ordinance is challenging and, frankly, could be interpreted both ways.
Okay.
Yeah, very good question. Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions from council? Okay. Thank you very much.
I think the applicant would like to come up and make a presentation.
Okay.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for having us here today. It's a pleasure presenting you here tonight a plan that really bears fruit of all the hard work y'all did on the Corinth 2040 Vision Plan. And I really do believe that we have all the right players at the right time, and so to speak, in order to kind of get this project off of the ground and really show some strategic growth here in the city of Corinth. I have with me tonight, we have Greystar Development. They are the largest multifamily developer in the world. They completely handle their business from soup to nuts in terms of development, the horizontal, the vertical component, and the ongoing property management component of their properties, as well as Maloof Interest. Maloof Interest has owned this land for approximately 20 years already here in the city of Corinth, and they are known for bringing quality commercial into established and growing communities and have a high network of commercial contacts to bring the quality commercial that you would like to see here. And so with that, Michelle did a really great job of kind of going over your Corinth 2040 Vision Plan and how our project kind of fits into that. And so kind of going back to what she did say is just concentrating, the commercial aspect right here along I-35, and then transitioning and utilizing some kind of urban residential as a transition between the retail and the commercial into the single-family neighborhoods that are already existing. This is a really great slide that kind of shows you the existing floodplain of the area right now. As of right now, 54% of the acreage is undevelopable. It's in the floodplain. And so when most people think about development, they think about what you can see above the ground. How there's a lot of value in what has to go in from the horizontal improvements as well in order to get to that vertical component that everyone sees and enjoys. And so this slide really points out our site plan over the floodplain as it will be after the improvements are made by channelizing the drainage toward the creek. We do have the multifamily aspect right there, and then this drainage channel kind of bifurcates the sites between the retail, commercial, and the multifamily. And so kind of going back to your point about the 90-10 percentage, with the development challenges and with the development improvements, we're able to do, it'll be 23% of the retail commercial, 25% will still remain in the floodplain, and then you have 52% in the multifamily component. So those are kind of your new percentages after all the development improvements have come about. Along with this slide, I think it's really important to kind of take a look at these trees. So we actually did an extensive tree survey, and we're able to protect 38.5% of the surveyed caliper inches. Those are to be preserved, including some of those really major ones that Ms. Mikesell mentioned earlier about the 40 caliper inch right there at the corner of Lake Sharon and South Corinth Parkway. But between the combination of these preserved trees and the new plantings, we've satisfied the new tree ordinance that y'all passed earlier last year. Okay, so on this slide, I just want to kind of take you through a little tour of our site plan and walk you through some of the thought process and intentionality of what we have presented here tonight. So along the western property line and the southern property line, we do have those two-story townhome-style buildings. All of those are, 2 to 3 bedroom. They have attached rear entry 2-car garages with those private front yards that are going to interact with the Lake Sharon streetscape. And I have a photo of that later on in the presentation to give more of a visual. Also, that main entrance along Lake Sharon, let me point that out here. It does kind of have this urban feel in terms of parallel parking, extended sidewalks. We really want to have that to invite the community the existing community into this new community so that it feels cohesive and a part of a greater plan. We've tucked the 4-story multifamily buildings inside the development, but we've allowed these visual pocket parks through here to kind of break up any kind of building monotony and whatnot. And then we still are hiding the detached parking field behind the buildings, and so out of that public realm and out of the view of Lake Sharon and Corinth Parkway. Throughout the development as a whole, we have provided lots of little just gathering places, if you will, just thoughtful spaces for community to be together. So starting here at this corner, we have kind of a little pocket park. All of these will have benches, some kind of seating, just to create a sense of place, a sense of arrival. You'll also find those here as well. And this little corner up here, we have this trail access that goes from Corinth Parkway all the way through the site, across the promenade to the retail, which we'll talk more in detail earlier. It loops through the tree preservation and even connects to the other development to the north of us, the Realty Capital, to the best of our knowledge of where their plans are this present day. But in saying that, there's a little fitness station here, dog park plan with additional guest parking. This dog park would be open to the public, so anyone in Corinth could come and bring their pup here and enjoy these spaces. So the idea is to kind of create this open community. It's not gated, where everyone can be involved and a part of this. So in addition to all that, let's go talk about this landscape promenade. Staff showed some cross sections to give you more of that lateral viewpoint. But I want to paint a little bit more of a picture here, because we do have this retail over to the side of which we're planning on creating some more Class A retail sit-down restaurants. The restaurants will have the front-facing facades along I-35. That's to kind of capture the attention of commuters and that visual of bringing people into the development. But they're outdoor seating. They'll have indoor and outdoor seating. And that outdoor seating would be concentrated here in the rear. This is another one of those pocket parks, a little pergola area, and then it would overlook this landscape promenade. So really, in essence, this is the drainage channel that's improving all of the floodplain in this area. But we've decided to heavily landscape it, create a sidewalk, trail connectivity. So if you can kind of imagine walking with your family, having a bite to eat, grabbing an ice cream cone, and then taking that stroll along that promenade, have some pedestrian-centered lighting, really to create a sense of place and a sense of community where you can kind of walk off that meal and enjoy a nice evening out. The idea is to kind of create this less vehicle-centered destination so that you have people who are walking or riding their bikes over to this retail restaurant center. Specifically, the residents of the multifamily portion, in addition to having that connectivity with the amenitized trail, they'll have private access to the fitness center, offices, club room, etc., swimming pool that would not necessarily be open to the public, but that they'll have that private access to. This is an entry view on Lake Sharon that we were kind of talking about earlier. It just highlights those sidewalk connectivity from the road. You can also see how the private yards and the gates kind of orient with the street. There will be additional kind of plantings through here, but we've left them off of the rendering so that you can actually see through them. Parallel parking to give it that urban feel and whatnot. That is depicting that. On this slide, I want to highlight the architecture, and I think Councilmember Garber, this will hopefully answer some of your questions as we point out a few things. And let me catch up with myself here. Okay, so we have committed to doing 100% masonry on the buildings, except for those accent materials above the top plate and inside the patios and the recesses and whatnot. And what we're talking about when we say that is all of this. So this is kind of the up top plate. And so all of this up here is that accent material, and this is the cementitious fiberboard, but it's taking that cedar shake style tile. We have the 3-foot overhangs and whatnot, and it really just adds the visual detail of the building. And it's not taking away from the masonry feel that the public is experiencing from the street level or what is surrounding them. So all of this is remaining masonry. It's just these accent materials up at the top. And so if you remove that, you're going to get more of a shorter building. You're going to take away some of the differentiation in materials, and so you're losing a lack of interest, and then you end up just having a very dense masonry building sitting on the edge of the street. And so it's really there to provide a lightning effect, to provide suggest a higher quality. We have the different changes in the masonry pattern. So you have a herringbone here, if you can kind of see that detail, the soldier course and row lock around those transparency areas. These are all, a little bit more higher cost construction details that really add to the long-term value and visual value that you are experiencing with this project. Does that kind of answer your question?
It does. Actually, seeing this rendering is helpful. You don't, by any chance, have the original renderings presented to Planning and Zoning, do you?
So these were the original renderings.
Okay.
They, at their suggestion,
their
wanted
suggestion
all of this
was
to be
the top.
masonry or to be removed.
That answers my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is another project of Greystar's, Elan, and this is at the Elan Inwood. It's at the corner of Inwood and Forest in Dallas. And I pulled this photo up just to kind of highlight those yards and the little 4-foot height gates that you'll see, so you can kind of see a real picture of how that's going to interact. Obviously, this is different architecture than what we're proposing, but this will give you a sense as to what those feel like and highlighting those private yards. This is a rendering of the urban commercial and retail. As you can see, and one of the benefits of doing this all together in terms of we get to kind of blend all of the architectural style and detail to create a really cohesive, intentional site plan, even though that this is going to be in the second phase and more or less come along with the I-35 improvements. And so it will be a little later than the multifamily phase, but by doing a plan development and tying this all together, we're able to make sure that they look cohesive and that they look like they were meant to be built together at the same time. And so this kind of shows you, and I think my next photo is going to show you those more outdoor patio areas and whatnot that we're proposing is a great thing. But kind of going back to that drainage component and the site plan in terms of that, I'm going to flip back really quickly and kind of talk about this here. So the 40,000 square feet in retail and commercial, all of that section is previously in the floodplain. 40,000 square feet of retail in and of itself does not necessarily produce the amount of revenue needed to overcome the development challenges of pulling that site along 35 where you want your retail to be out of the floodplain. The combination of utilizing the multifamily section and doing all of that development at one time, even though that the retail is coming later, is actually pulling that out of the floodplain in terms of a comprehensive engineering solution. And so I say all of that just so you kind of have like the knowledge that this isn't possible kind of without this, and it's the reason why we're doing all of this together at one time. So, in addition to all of the, improving the current drainage, reducing the floodplain and increasing the developable area of the site, expanding that trail network that was kind of mentioned in your comprehensive plan is something that you wanted to do to bring value to the citizens' health, and providing destination retail and restaurants. There's a real tangible impact to the city of Corinth as well in terms of, this project across will provide $2.3 million in permit fee revenue across the project, $1.8 million in annual property taxes, and $1.1 million in annual sales tax. And so these revenue events help support the other capital improvement projects that Corinth sets forth to do every year, year over year. At this time, I have a few more slides if we get into questions, but that kind of concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer some questions.
The engineering and the work that will take the commercial component out of the floodplain, that will be done as part of Phase 1?
Yes. So everything, I'm going to go back to my site plan real quick. So everything will be done in Phase 1 in terms of the civil engineering, to the point where this landscape promenade also has to be in place and be completed with the multifamily development. And then as soon as the I-35 improvements are kind of underway and kind of nearing completion, and also coexisting with the Realty Capital development to the north and creating synergy there, as when that comes online, is when we'll kind of start planning out that retail component.
And I know we hear different things from TxDOT, but what is the latest y'all are hearing with regard to the completion of the reconfiguration of the frontage there?
So I believe their plans, and I'm going to look to John Webb because he has more correspondence with TxDOT than I do.
The latest on their website is that they want to let the project in 2024, and they're looking around a 2-year construction period.
And so that everybody has realistic expectations, if this were approved, how long would it take? What would y'all think as far as your timeline to complete Phase 1?
So the timeline would be that we would have our engineering approval done by the end of this year in order to break ground. And then it's, about a 22 to 26 month build time in terms of the multifamily, all of the buildings.
So about 3 years from today,
yes,
to actually see the buildings being issued certificates of occupancy.
That's correct.
And the hope being that would be well timed for the completion of the frontage.
Yes.
And then the commercial will be ready at that point. And then, and I don't know if this is your bailiwick, but as far as when commercial folks would be interested in developing that, would that, from your market perspective, would you expect that they would be a lot more interested after that frontage is completed, or
yes,
do they typically buy after?
So they start getting interested when it's nearing completion, but no one wants to be a new tenant when your frontage road is under construction. And so, we want to set up the tenants and those who are going to lease space out of this for the best possible outcome so that they're successful, so that everyone's successful, right? And so when that kind of starts nearing in and they have good access points and traffic isn't being steered around in different directions, then is when you really start picking up traction as to who your leaseholders are going to be.
And I think Mr. Webb was shaking his head too, that's consistent with your experience.
That's what we've been told from the commercial.
So despite the relatively long timeline, it's actually pretty well timed from what we know about the completion of the TxDOT improvements to get this in place to be ready for commercial development when the market would be ready.
And also remember, they're going to have a multi-month lease-up period. I mean, it'll probably take 6 plus months to fully lease the project. So just because it's finished and we start issuing COs for the buildings, it's not going to lease up overnight.
Sure, but people would be a lot less interested in leasing if the roadway is not finished.
Probably, but I mean, yeah. But again, I think the questions about the commercial, the interchange needs to be complete to really make that an attractive commercial corner.
I think that's ultimately my question.
And also tying in with the Realty Capital, which I know they're in the process of getting their civil engineering plans approved currently. So,
Thank you.
I have a question. What was the objection to changing that from a 4-story to a 3-story on your most eastern multifamily building?
I don't think it was an objection per se. We did have, and then if IT somewhere behind me could go to those supplemental slides, we actually took some drone footage from that area of where that building would be, looking over into that neighborhood. And it really just doesn't pose a privacy issue because it lines up with a cul-de-sac, not necessarily a neighbor's yard. And so it wasn't an objection per se. It was just more or less, there was no real negative impact other than the fact that it's just a 4-story building in terms of impact to the neighborhood. And there was a slide deck of photos.
And mine isn't necessarily, I wasn't necessarily thinking about the neighborhood just south of it. I was thinking more if you're outdoor dining right there and everybody is sitting out on the patio and you have 4 stories. Look, that was kind of where my brain went on I think a 3-story might be more aesthetically, if you're not having this ginormous building while you're sitting there having a cup of coffee or dessert.
Gotcha. Okay, so I think the plan more is to have the restaurant retail more focused on these buildings right here. And so in terms of their viewpoint and whatnot, if this is your 4-story building, I mean, right across here, you still got some trees, the drainage channel. This is quite a good distance away from this. It's not going to be like, oh, I'm sitting here and there's a 4-story building. You're going to have quite a bit of sight distance in between you and that building, as well as landscaping to break up that visual cue. And then most of the restaurants are kind of being planned through here, where you have a visual across the promenade and you're not necessarily looking directly at a 4-story building. But I see your point where you're...
Yeah, because when you're 4 stories high, you got a pretty long line of sight.
Right, and I think about like this wall right here from me, that feels pretty ominous, but you got to think that's another 200 feet away.
Sure. Yeah, but 2 more stories up. This is only 2 stories, right?
Right.
So it's twice this height, right? So your line of sight when you're on 4 stories, it's, you know what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying, but I also think about all the patio restaurants in other downtown settings and things like that, and I feel like
we're not downtown.
No, I'm just saying it doesn't seem to impact diners. They're only there temporarily. It's a 30-minute to an hour viewpoint, and I hope that they're looking and conversing at the person across them
not
looking at the building. You're welcome.
I have an issue with that as well, and it's for aesthetics. I mean, everything else is 2 stories all the way around here, and then you've got this big 4-story. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's not going to flow. I mean, it's going to just look very out of place in like a big building there.
So we talk about 4 stories, and the other buildings are 2-story, but then you have the massing of the roof, and so it's not like, I'm trying to explain.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
Hey, John, What are the heights of the buildings that are being proposed by Realty Capital?
I don't know the height of the hotel, but it was supposed to be a 4-story, and then their multifamily ranges from those 2-story townhomes along their southern property to 4-story multifamily.
But it's interior, right? The 4-story on Realty Capital is interior. It's not across the street from a single-family development, right?
Well, of course, the 4-story will wrap Corinth Parkway.
But if Realty Capital builds what we've approved for them to build, there aren't going to be 4-story buildings sitting out here in isolation. There's going to be a series of 4-story buildings on either side of that creek.
You're going to have that wrap project that's 4-story, 4-story hotel, and then, of course, the 1-story retail restaurants.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from council? Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Okay. At this time, I'll open up the public hearing. And Orrin, is it Charter? Would like to speak? Please state your name and your address for the records, please.
My name is Ulin Chotev, 2015 Yellowstone Lane, Corinth, Texas, 76210. It is really sad to see how we destroy our environment, our habitat, and we don't have to. I don't know why you guys agreed on that. Why are you approving those projects of building? Did you hear how many times the word urban was said? Urban. I thought when so many people express their opposition to building more such structure, that will have some impact. And now we are now, me and my family are personally impacted because this is the forest. We drive around every day. We go to drive kids to school. I'm begging you to take seriously this personal belief and call to stop urbanizing Corinth, to keep our town green and breathable and livable. Let people who like apartments build and develop in Dallas, in Fort Worth, in bigger cities. Let's not focus and be obsessed with those numbers of projected tax income, because if urbanization was great for budget, the big cities wouldn't struggle. Actually, our financial situation is better that of Dallas or New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles. More people doesn't mean more money necessarily. And I really don't want to talk about money. We came here to live, not to make money. Me and my kids, we don't want to be our town to get more income. We want to live in a place that is for humans. Please stop approving projects with that involve urbanization. I think I'm not the only one. And my voice with my horrible English resonates, I believe, and will be supported by the majority. This country has elections every year. Please don't let people at the time of election tell you what I'm telling you now. I like what you guys are doing. I respect so much what you did with Corinth. Please don't ruin that. Thank you.
Thank you. There's Melvin Locklear. He does not want to speak. but he is against it, and we will put this in the records. And then there's Melaine Ristow, and she does not want to speak on this agenda item. She's not for or against, according to this, but we'll put this in the records for this hearing. Is there anybody else in the audience? Just come up to the podium, state your name and your address, please.
Yes, I'm Jim. I'm a local resident. I live on Skyview, near Meadowview, and I just wanted to make a comment about, as I drive around, it seems like there's already too many apartments, and it puts a burden on the grid, puts a burden on us property owners, on our property taxes, and I just really think that they need to scale this sucker down. It just looks like it's just way too much, like maybe should be half the amount of apartments, so we don't take a chance on urbanizing. That's all I got.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Please state your name and your address.
My name is Melanie Godwin, and I live at 1514 Nightingale Lane. And I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. I really didn't plan on speaking. I've lived in Corinth for 21 years. I've raised one son who now goes to college up in Oklahoma, and I have a daughter that's still here at Geyer Elementary. It's hard enough right now trying to get to the freeway. We don't even know, with all those developments that are being built down Lake Sharon right now, what that's going to bring. It's just so much traffic, and it's just like they said, you guys are ruining our paradise that we have here. I mean, if you want to live in an apartment, go to Flower Mound or go to Denton or go to, Louisville. You guys see the traffic over in Lake Dallas. It's so disheartening to try to even get out of a business or get in a business here. In the city, I saw on the display, they said that it's approved up there for like a vape shop and stuff like that at this place. But yet when they show their presentation, there's nothing that says vape shop. It's this beautiful restaurant that everybody's like oohing and awing about. But is that really what it's going to be once this is completed? They didn't even respect you guys enough to say, okay, we'll go with the plan that you guys said, which is 2 or 3 stories. They said, we're going to decline that. We still want 4 stories. We're going to do that. And I was at the planning and zoning meeting the other night, and I got up and spoke, and it was like looking through glass eyes. I know today in there he said they aren't able to make decisions, and it obviously is you guys, I guess. But I've talked to so many residents, and they're all like, why go to the city meetings? Nobody cares. No, it's already planned. They said that you guys have already approved everything that's already on the table, so why go to these meetings? And it shows, because in both the last 2 meetings, they've said nobody has come to oppose any of this stuff. Who are they sending out this stuff out to? I've never got anything saying, can you come to this meeting and either approve or oppose? I've never seen anything like that. And I just don't understand. Either Corinth's doing a poor job alerting their residents, or the planners and builders, developers, are doing a poor job inviting people.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wants to speak? State your name and your address.
Beckley Court. And I, too, am against this. When I look out my window, I will see these apartments. And I agree that I don't want to look out my window and see 3- and 4-story buildings in my backyard, basically. And along with the traffic, I work from home. I can tell you that the noise level has gone up. I hear it all day long. And it's not just from construction of the new development being built down the street. You can't even take a walk without having a peaceful walk. It's so noisy now. And not to mention the traffic. If you go on Facebook and the neighborhood apps, you'll see nobody wants this. Nobody wants more apartments in Corinth. So that's all I wanted to say. I just don't want to see it in my backyard.
Thank you. Yep. Come to the podium.
I'm just worried about what it's going to do to utilities also. The electric grid, then we got water and sewer, and I'm just, that many apartments all at once, when you just look around and see, like, we're balanced, like 50-50 right now. It looks like it. I mean, I'm just driving around. This looks like we got a pretty good setup. But if we go and just put this beast of an apartment like we had those other three monstrosities that just came up, I'm just worried that, we're going to, like, be a little bit too urban. And, you got crime, you got pollution, littering and stuff like that. That's all I wanted to say. Because I really think that we got to consider the grid. I don't want my power going out in the summer because we have too many apartments. I don't want my power going out on the next vortex for longer days. So, anyway, I thought there was more. I wish I had wrote it down. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mike King, 2610 Zachary Drive. You guys have heard me say this before when I've spoken, that we always look at the piece of the pie with the most whipped cream. And we take each one of these developments on an individual basis and we vote, or y'all vote, which is controlling of our lives. But are we looking at the whole pie? I know you guys cannot interact with me right now. I don't really agree with that, but be able to tell by facial expressions. How many of y'all right now understand the traffic survey that was done on this particular development? Probably not many. Maybe a couple of y'all that are in the business, but I bet the majority don't. You've heard from the other residents about the increase of traffic that's just going on Lake Sharon, with Ashford, all the developments going on. They're putting a roundabout that's taking forever to get up. It seems like a lot of this stuff was predetermined. And like the engineer that was designing that roundabout argued with me and said, Mr. King, you don't believe the roundabout will ease the traffic flow? I said, that ain't what I said, sir. What I said is the majority of the residents don't want the increased flow of traffic. And once again, with all the rentals, Mr. Webb has graciously provided, his staff has provided me all the information of all the developments that are going on that are multifamily at various stages in Corinth. Why? When you hear time after time after time, and it's very a truthful statement. Y'all know I'm very active in social media, and most of the residents have got the mentality that why go to City Hall? Because they won't listen to us. They've already predetermined their mind. And look at all these multifamily rentals coming into our city. Read the opening paragraph of the City of Corinth history page. We're a city of green. Where? Everything's turning to dirt and buildings. I just drove from my house. Most of y'all know where I live. I came up Corinth Parkway. Both sides of the roads are already getting tore up, nothing but dirt. Lake Sharon, nothing but dirt. We're how many months are we before the development start by the high school with more? We got the apartments that's creating a mud bath on Swisher next to the facility. Stop, y'all. We don't want it. The majority of the residents don't want it. Don't want all these developments. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and your address for the records, please.
Melanie Bristow. I'm at 2013 Yellowstone in Corinth 76210. I thought my comments were going to be read out loud, and since they weren't, I will go ahead and state them.
Time and time again, we have heard since the loss of the city manager, that there was going to be a reevaluation when the new person came in of the 2040 plan, and that the Planning and Zoning Commission would be urged to reconsider any recommendations they made until that evaluation was done. And I think we have that new person in place now, but there's been no talk of what's happening with that 2040 plan, and maybe reevaluating that with the new person. The other thing I wanted to mention was I keep hearing about meetings where residents are invited to speak and give input on these developments, and nobody shows up. I would also request that the city make that 200 feet from wherever the development is going on, extend that for at least a mile all the way around so that you can get input. Nobody's showing up because 200 feet is nothing. You're talking about acres of development. 200 feet around that is just not going to get you anything. That's all.
Thank you. Anybody else? Please state your name and your address, please.
Nico Hutchinson, 2805 Cochise Court. I originally came here because I was filling a Boy Scout requirement. But I think it helps hearing from the younger generation. I'm a senior at Lake Dallas High School, top 10 in my class. I've done many things, gone to Boys State, achieved many scholarships, and hopefully going to USC tomorrow. But my thing is that with all this and what I've heard from all my classmates at Lake Dallas High School is we're talking about the same thing that the adults are. I still remember as a little kid growing up here as a 13-year-old senior seeing all these trees, all this greenery, and just loving it because we could go outside and play. We could just see everything and be like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. And seeing the dirt piles now, it hurts because we see it hurt our parents. You know, they have to live here. My parents are about to settle their mortgage, but their property tax went up, and that kind of sucks because right now at a time when our family can't really afford that, it hurts seeing your parents have that. And I think that if we just kept the greenery that we have, Corinth was meant to be a peaceful place. My parents moved here 30 odd years ago, and it was just being built in our area. And now what has come to be is we've seen every single new development all the way from the old high school to the new one and now the new renovations. And I think the biggest thing that is to be considered is all these developments because although I may be moving on to a new area, there's a high likelihood that me or all my other classmates are within a 5 to 10 mile radius. That could be Flower Mound, that could be Highland Village, but we're all going to visit our parents. They're still going to be here, and we don't want to come back and just see buildings. We want to see our childhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Greg Russell, 2805 Whetstone, Corinth. I really had no intentions of actually speaking today, but just listening to what the developer's talking about. And I've heard other developers talk about, the taxes are coming in. Nobody's ever mentioning how much school taxes that all these developers' apartments are going to be paying. Apartments going to bring in, 1.5, maybe 2.5 children. How's the schools going to handle all this? I know that's more of a question for the school board, but we as a board, you as a board, as residents, we have to think about those too. Where's that coming from? We heard from him, and they're concerned about this. But can somebody ever give us some answers about that part of the of the taxes and stuff that developers will be paying for? That's the big thing of us, because like he said, our taxes are going up. Everybody's struggling through this. But, Lake Dallas already has one of the highest school tax brackets it is, and if they keep building apartments and they don't have to build school taxes, ours are going to go up. I'm all about development. I'm all about let's choose wisely what we put here instead of apartments. Let's get residential houses in there. I understand that's a floodplain there, but there's other things we could possibly do with that. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, at this time, then, I'll close the public hearing, and I will entertain a motion on that item.
Mayor, can I make a comment?
Sure.
Okay, I understand that there's challenges with that property, with the waterway. I think that maybe there could have been some creative development to put this development more in balance. That's been my biggest objection to this, is that out of the 32 acres, we have 25 acres that are multifamily or the green space and 7.5 acres that are retail. So as a council member, one of my goals when I ran was to get businesses in here that would increase the sales tax revenue and then maybe take some of the tax burden off of the property owners. But when we're giving 25 acres to multifamily and only 7.5 to retail or sales tax revenue generating businesses, I think we're doing a disservice. For future, I'm not saying that I'm against the multifamily. I just think this development plan is completely out of balance. I think the objection to the making that most easterly building down to 3 stories, I don't understand why that would be an objection, but apparently it is. And with the Realty Capital and combined with this, that area is going to have 739 multifamily dwelling units. I just think that is too much for that area. I think we need a little bit more retail, more retail in that area, and less multifamily. I just think that it is not balanced at all, and I think that once those apartments go in, there's no opportunity for a sales tax revenue generating business. That land's gone. So those are some of the issues that I have with this plan. So I just would like to see a plan that has more retail on the I-35 service road, and that plan be in better balance. It's in complete opposition to how it's currently zoned. In my interpretation, I understand, Michelle, may be different than, but when we're going from a 90% to 10% allowing for multifamily and essentially flipping that, I think there was a reason why it was zoned MXC initially, and I don't think this meets the spirit of that in any way. So that's my 2 cents.
Yes. Sure, you can have a rebuttal. Yep, come up.
I was taking notes as some of the citizens were talking and wanted to address some of their concerns as well. I think some of the easier low-hanging fruit is we're actually promising that there will not be a vape shop there. That's in one of the prohibited uses on the site, as well as standalone retail pad sites and drive-throughs, because we really do want to bring that Class A quality sit-down restaurant retail to the community. And also, the height restriction was going to be to that one building, and I guess IT never found my slides where we took the photos. That's okay, in terms of how that was going to look from that. But also, too, in terms of what this is already zoned is mixed-use commercial. And so we're hearing traffic a lot come up in some of these concerns. And so as the site stands, and kind of just breaking down that traffic study in more layman's terms, this whole entire development right here produces roughly 5,300 trips a day in terms of traffic counts. And so if the whole entire site, if we left the retail the same along I-35, and let's just say hypothetically we replaced all the multifamily with a big box retail, they would generate about another 14,000 trips per day. And so that would greatly increase the traffic concerns if it was to remain mixed-use commercial. Another point to kind of point out in terms of what could be done on a mixed-use commercial when they use that 90-10 ratio, but in this there's no density caps and there's no height restrictions. And so when we talk about the 90-10 commercial to residential, I mean, you could go as vertical in terms of taking up land space of doing the commercial on the bottom floor and going all the way up vertical with the same amount of multifamily just to meet that. And so I think with here, though, utilizing the natural topography, preserving the trees, adding some nice pocket park spaces for the whole entire community to enjoy that also encapsulates the Corinth 2040 vision plan, not just in terms of zoning or what we're putting here, but really in terms of taking the trail network and the parks and all the other goals that you wanted to reach. We've spent a lot of time, a lot of thoughtful time on this site plan and creating something purposeful to put in front of you that we felt captured what the original intent was. And so that just kind of addresses some of those. School district-wise, I do have a slide, and I do want to show this. So Greystar, the great benefits of Greystar is they have lots of data. And we have kind of this chart that shows the age of the residents. So these are some other local projects that are local to this area. And roughly, 10% of Greystar's residents are between the ages of 0 and 18. And so they do pay the school tax burden as well. And so you have a lot of income coming in for the schools, but you're not producing a lot of burden on the school district because our residents are not of the school-aged children. And also just having a multifamily development as well as commercial development allows the city to reduce that property tax percentage. And we don't have exemptions like homestead exemptions or senior exemptions that might be on an individual home. We're paying the full amount of the taxable value on these year over year. And so hopefully that kind of just brings some more clarity to some of those major concerns and some of the major themes that I heard while listening to the citizens of Corinth. And then I believe he doesn't want to talk anymore. So at that, I'll return to my chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to add, I think it's beautiful. Yes. I think your buildings, I think your plan is beautiful. I think you're very thoughtful in leaving lots of green space. My issue isn't with the plan itself. My issue is with the balance of the plan. That's where it is. I'm sure you build a beautiful product, and I think your retail is beautiful, as well as the multifamily. I just think it's too much multifamily in percentage-wise.
I do want to pull Steve up here, though, and so he can kind of talk about that balance and how much retail we feel like we can successfully activate, and you don't have empty spaces. And so I do want him to speak with that because he's really the expert in the room on that, so I am going to call him up. Put you on the spot. Tag team it.
Hello, my name's Steve Gregory with Maloof Interest, 4143 Maple, Dallas. As Nikki said, and has done a great job, and I was hoping she wouldn't ask me to come up here, but since I am, I will give you a little context, if I can, for a moment. We've owned this property for 20 years. We've seen a lot of different councils come through. We originally bought this as a commercial property investment. It's what we do. We're, if not the most active, we're one of the most active grocery store developers in North Texas. That's our primary driver. That's why, because we're retail focused, we affiliate with Greystar, who's the largest apartment developer in the country, when we do these mixed use projects. Because we feel like we're first class retail, we want first class apartments. And we realized several years ago the market didn't want this to be a commercial project. We work with every grocery retailer, big box, large scale retailer that this property is zoned for. And they've let us know this is not a large-scale commercial project they want to be in. 2181 is your major east-west corridor with I-35. That's what everyone's identified, those corridors they want to be on. So we've patiently held the property, and we have seen a lot of different people come through. But as former Commissioner Marchant said earlier, Corinth is always, what you've exhibited is responsible leadership and responsible growth. And so we were very excited to see you develop the 2040 plan, because the market had said to us, if you don't let us put a car dealership here, we want multifamily. And we were never going to ask to put a car dealership here. So we are enthusiastic to see and excited to see when the 2040 plan came through, it spoke to what the market wanted. A multifamily TOD type project in the core with retail along I-35, because we know about 40,000 feet of retail, that will succeed in this location. And we are very confident of that. We've been working with John and his predecessor and Michelle for going on about 20 months now. And we've averaged about a plan per month if you add up all the plans we've worked through. And they've been wonderful to work with. And that's why we're really proud to stand here and show you what we've got. So that's a long way of saying we've worked on this for a very long time. We've waited a really long time to bring you something that we think will succeed. And we are confident that the retail that we've put here is retail that will succeed. We like to say several things, one of which we don't build empty buildings. And we know the city doesn't want us to build empty buildings. For this location, I-35 adjacent retail is what will succeed. They'll serve the neighborhoods. And we like to leave, when we develop, we want the places to be better than when we started. And we believe that's what this project does. And I'm happy to answer any questions if y'all have them.
Are there any questions, Council?
The property tax numbers that you provided, those were just Corinth's property tax numbers? Or was that the total property tax on that development? So Corinth's numbers would be about a fourth of the numbers that you presented, give or take.
I will have to admit I'm not the property tax expert on that to answer that question. But if there's any others, I'd be happy to answer those.
Yeah, so Corinth's, we're breaking it down. I updated it with your... So the annual property tax, it'd be about $424,000 on an annual basis, which is significantly higher of what you have now. But I think the real key, too, is when you go out to, is your bonding capacity. So when you go out to do those major capital improvement projects in your city and you kind of sell the bonds. So typically they trade at about 3.25% rate. And so it really, the development as a whole gives you about $2.5 million in additional bonding capacity for those other capital improvement projects for your city.
Any other question, Council?
I have a comment or maybe a question. So you're here, and I agree with Kelly. Your project is really nice and going to get us some retail, but you're asking us to change our zoning, and we're asking you to change to the 3-story or 2-story, but yet you denied that. And I just want to know why you're not willing to maybe, do something like that. Maybe we could meet in the middle or, something, because you're asking us to change, and we're asking you to change, and then y'all denied it.
Sure. So I don't think we're, yes. Yes.
I think we're prepared to say, if you're prepared to vote, we'd be prepared to reduce that building to 3 stories. If you're prepared to approve that, we'd be prepared to say, okay. And if there's no other questions.
Are there any other questions? Okay. I entertain a motion on this item.
Well, I would move to approve as presented.
I move the second Sandbergs as presented.
Is there any further discussion?
I do want to make a few comments.
Sure. Go ahead.
I see this development as an extension. Well, I mean, it's in our TOD. And the TOD was developed along with our comprehensive plan several years ago. This property has been sitting vacant, well, practically forever. I mean, it's had some cows on it and some horses on it. It is an extremely challenging piece of property to develop. A lot of it is in the floodplain. It sits there next to 35, and if you drive by it, you think, well, that's a prime piece of property. It's not. I mean, there's a reason it's still sitting there. I think the plan that's been developed by our staff in conjunction with the developer will marry nicely with what's planned with Realty Capital right next door. I think it's going to be beautiful when it gets built. I don't think that it's realistic to think that property is going to turn into single-family development, a Costco, an H-E-B, or really much different than what's planned for it, unless it sits there vacant. I don't believe that my role as a city council member is to preserve open space on other people's private property when they want to make a legal use of it. Yes, there has been a lot of development in Corinth in the last 2 or 3 years. And does it look as good as it did? Well, not right now, while the dirt's being turned over. It's hard to look at. But that's not how it's going to end up. We have been sending signals, your representatives, and I've been on this council a long time, to the market about what we think would be best in that area. We sent those signals after we got input from the community members that participated in that plan. I don't think it's responsible government to change those signals after they've been working with our council, our staff for 2 years practically, to develop a plan consistent with what we've been communicating we want. If somebody treated you that way, you wouldn't have a lot of respect for them. And I understand that there are people in this community that don't agree with this plan. But I think the majority of the people do. And if they don't, that's okay. You know, the city council can turn over. But these are the signals that we have been sending. I have been elected, I don't know, unopposed 4 or 5 times. And I'm going to vote consistent with what we have been communicating to the market so that other responsible developers, if they want to come here, know they can count on what we're telling them through the ways we communicate with them, through our comprehensive plan, through our 2040 plan, through our staff, so that we can attract the very best people to our community, the very best developers. And I understand when things are happening close to your house that feels different. And I feel empathy for that and I feel sympathy for that. But I really believe when this is done, it'll be first class and it'll be something that you're proud of. And it will be painful during the process. Construction is not fun on anybody. But I believe this is consistent with what we've been planning for years. I think it will attract the type of development, restaurants and other high-quality retail that we've been wanting here, that our citizens have been telling us they've been wanting for years and years. But if this is approved tonight, all of these things are very long-term. You're still looking at 3 to 5 years to realize the vision that you're looking at tonight. But if we don't act tonight, consistent with what we've communicated, nothing may happen on that property for another 5 or 10 years. And you never know when you reach a point where you've missed the window. And I think this is the right time for this development, consistent with the expansion of I-35 and consistent with what the market's telling us is the highest and best use for that property.
May I make an amendment to the motion, and then we can vote on that amendment? prior to the motion? Okay. I'd like to amend Sam's motion to include the offer that we had at the end, where nothing's over 3 stories.
That wasn't it.
I'm sorry. That building is not over 3 stories.
Need a second to the amendment.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay. All right. What we'll do is we'll have to vote on the amendment first. So at this time, is there any further discussion on the amendment? Okay. Cast your vote on the amendment. It passes 3-2. Now we'll...
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Okay. It's not often I sit up here actually and vacillate back and forth between long-term plans and immediate response, because I'm quite an empathetic person. And I hear the comments and I don't disagree. I don't disagree. The two challenges that I see that Corinth is facing over the next 15 years is going to be a substantial lack of infrastructure and finances. So currently, the city of Corinth is battling constantly for resources to hire police officers, to pay police officers what they need to be paid, and the same for public safety. And that does not even begin to touch, which is about 50% of our budget, that doesn't even begin to touch the multiple hundreds of millions of dollars worth of infrastructure that is going to need to be maintained. And so in my private life, when I feel myself vacillating between an emotion, which is, the emotion that was so well talked about tonight, especially from you, you need to be a public speaker. I think that was excellent. Is to weigh that against what we think is going to be best for Corinth 15 years from now. Because nobody on this council is going to be on the same council 15 years from now. And what we've seen in other smaller cities is they try to keep it green for as long as they can. And now all of a sudden they can't afford to pay their police officers. And now all of a sudden we have ads out in the paper to try to hire water department people, which sat open for 6 months because we couldn't afford to pay them. And so without very strategic development to bring resources into the city of Corinth so that we can compete with the Flower Mounds, the Louisvilles, which have a bad habit of taking officers and other staff members from us because they have the infrastructure to be able to pay. It's a race against time. And unfortunately, we find ourselves here. So when we put these plans into place, it was like 20 years from now, this is what we think we might be able to achieve. And then we begin to build trust with developers and with the public to say, yes, when a Corinth City Council has set out a plan, this is what we intend to do. And vice versa for our citizens. So when we remove zoning or we take stuff out of the comprehensive plan because we don't want this to be high density anymore, we mean it. It's not going to vacillate back and forth. And so where we sit tonight is not a decision over what's best for Corinth over the next 3 years. It's to ensure, and I feel confident that the plan that we have, at least in the TOD, is going to put Corinth in the opportunity to still be in the top 20 safest cities in Texas. What we do not want to see happen is what happens at other smaller cities. Some of them neighbor us, where they have vacillated over decisions and taken their eye off of the vision 15, 20 years, and they do what feels right now. Because there was somebody in front of me that felt upset, and this was the decision that I made in this moment, and their tax rate's almost double what ours is. Because that sort of decision-making is what leads to very high property taxes, because everybody sitting in this room, we're the only ones here to pay that tax. We're the only ones. So when the police need a 15% pay increase, guess what our property taxes have to do? They have to go up 7% because they're half our budget, right? So there has to be some sort of development. Now, what you've said has not fallen on deaf ears. I think we need to have another community meeting and start discussing the plan as a whole. The plan will include still more multifamily districts around the TOD and around the park. That's what's already been promised. If there's anything else, let's talk about it. Let's put a plan together. But typically it has not worked out well for me in the long run to emotionally vacillate on an urgent decision.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak? Okay. Cast your vote.
Just want to let you know I had to mark everyone as abstain since we had the motion, so don't panic when you see abstain. You'll still be able to cast yay or nay, but if you see abstain, that's why.
Okay.
This is on Sam's motion. As amended.
No, we just voted on as amended.
The amendment. We just voted on the amendment.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to vote on the motion that Sam made with the amendment. Okay.
That's correct. You have the main motion in front of you. If it passes, then it would be amended by the amendment that was approved just a few minutes ago.
Cast your vote. It's 4-1. It passes. Okay. Thank you. Item number 17, consider an act on a resolution directing publication of a notice of intention to issue combination tax and revenue certificates of obligation to provide funds for streets, drainage, parks, waterworks, and sewer system improvements. Mr. Campbell.
You bet, Mayor and Council. This is the required resolution of intent to sell debt for our newspaper notification that we need to send. This is directly related to the CIP update that Leanne gave you a few weeks ago. And if there's any specific questions about the project, this includes quickly, and the staff can speak more specifically to this, the Walton Drive reconstruction, drainage improvements in the Shady Shores area, and the TxDOT Lake Sharon project utility relocations that the city's required to perform. So any specific questions the staff will answer.
Are there any questions on this item? Okay. I entertain a motion on this item.
Move to approve item 17 as presented.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Cast your vote. It's unanimous. Item number 18, consider an act on the Chapter 380 Economic Development Agreement with RAC Real Estate Equities, Corinth LLC, for the development of an industrial building at the southwest corner of North Corinth Street and Shady Shores Road in Corinth. Mr. Campbell.
Mayor, this is related to the project we discussed earlier this evening, and Elise Back, our Director of Economic Development, will give you the details.
Good evening, Mayor, members of Council. In your packet, you have a copy of the Chapter 380 agreement with RAC Real Estate Equities. It's for a proposed industrial building at the southwest corner of Shady Shores in North Corinth for a minimum of 56,000 square feet. Total investment, including the cost of land, is approximately $9 million. The building will be completed on or before December 31st of 2026, and they're anticipating full-time equivalent or jobs between 30 and 50 employees. Staff recommends that Council approve the 380 agreement as presented.
Are there any questions from Council? If not, I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Cast your vote. It's unanimous. Okay, item number 19 on the agenda has been tabled. Item number 20, consider an act on an agreement between the City of Corinth and Pavlov Media, Inc. for the use of city property for development and location of broadband infrastructure and authorize the city manager to execute the necessary documents. Mr. Campbell.
Mayor, this is related to the broadband project that you're all very familiar with. This was an agreement that we knew would come after the main agreement. Pavlov has to have facilities in each of the cities that are served by the fiber ring. The facilities are going to be at our water tower site, and this is the agreement for basically that rental. It's a license agreement, and it's $700 a month, and it's just the equipment they have to have for the project. So we'll answer any specific questions you may have.
Are there any questions from council? Okay. I'd entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve the agreement with Pavlov Media.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Cast your vote. It's unanimous. Council comments and future agenda items. The purpose of this section is to allow each council member the opportunity to provide general updates and or comments to fellow council members, the public, and or staff on any issues or future agenda. Also, in accordance with Section 30.085 of the Code of Ordinances, at this time, any council member may direct that an item be added as a business item to any future agenda. Mr. Burke.
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Garber.
Nothing, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Holsworth.
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Mrs. Henderson.
Nothing, sir.
Mrs. Pickens.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Campbell. Okay. We're adjourned.